Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to talk about Final Fantasy XIV. Now, Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail is the latest expansion that came out for Square Enix's MMORPG. And this particular game, you guys already know, or maybe you're new here, maybe you don't know, but I play Final Fantasy XIV. I've been playing it since inception. I've played it literally since the first original version before they shut down the game. And one thing I will say is this game has been on fairly easy mode-ish for the most part in the latest few expansions, but this particular expansion has actually up the difficulty to a point where it's a lot of fun for someone like me. But unfortunately, with that comes a lot of casual players or people who actually aren't really looking to play a game. They just want to find a way to socialize while doing, random stuff. Everybody is apparently complaining that the game is now too hard.
Get good. How?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, imagine playing a Final Fantasy MMORPG and complaining the game is too difficult. This is the world that we are living in currently. And you know what the issue is? Final Fantasy XIV has exploded in popularity over the last few expansions. And those last few expansions, aside from the most hardcore raid dungeons, were for the most part extremely easy. Most people would not struggle with almost anything that was presented, and most things can be completed with a pickup group, right? Whereas now with Dawntrail, things are extremely difficult. Well, not even extremely difficult. They're just a lot more difficult in comparison to what it was before. You actually have to pay attention to mechanics. If you don't dodge mechanics, you probably will die. All the mechanics end up hitting you extremely hard, and they are essentially not something that you could just breeze through. Even in the dungeons, I was playing the dungeons from level 92 or whatever all the way to 100. And the dungeons, the 4-man dungeons, are actually fairly decent. I'm telling you, the mechanics are very interesting, and I think that they did a good job. They didn't make it overly difficult, but they did something where you have to actually engage with the game in order to progress even slightly. Well, apparently, players don't like that. So let's get into this article, guys, from The Gamer. But of course, before we do, if you are new here, just consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, and like the video to push us out into that YouTube algorithm. It says Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail's expansion has added some pretty brutal dungeons and raids, as Yoshi P teased earlier this year, but some are arguing they're a bit too hard. A post on the Final Fantasy XIV forums has the community in a stir, one which claims dungeons are too hard and that they now dread them popping up in the MSQ. They make some sensible arguments and quite a few people agree with them, but it's an issue that seems to have split fans, and many have taken to Twitter to defend the increased difficulty. Now, again, what ends up happening is that when a game gets very popular, right? We see the same thing happen with Elden Ring. When a game gets very popular, that all the casual players want to join in on the game so that they can say that they're with everybody else, right? They want to be able to say they can play with their friends, whatever. When all the casual players join in, sure, it might be at a time when the game is a little bit easier, so they feel like they can, I guess, play the game better. But ultimately, what ends up happening is that at some point, if the game introduces higher difficulty that is not exactly optional, they are going to lose their minds. These casual players that just want a place to socialize, they don't actually want to play the game. They just want a place where they could talk in town and maybe do a dungeon every now and then. These kind of players, once they're presented with anything even remotely difficult, they're going to lose it. They're going to absolutely lose their mind. They've been so used to steamrolling content for the last XYZ amount of years that the moment you try to increase the difficulty, that's it. They're not going to want to get good, right? For them, it's not about the game. For them, it's about the socialization. But unfortunately, a lot of people that they're socializing with like to do the game, right? They like to do the dungeons, like to do the raids. So what ends up happening is they just completely feel left out. It says, before the release of Dawntrail expansion, Final Fantasy XIV director Yoshida, better known as Yoshi P, made an interesting claim about how he regrets turning the game into a game that you can play without stress. Ever since the release of Stormblood, there have been many vocal Final Fantasy XIV fans upset with how the game has gradually gotten easier over the years, particularly when it comes to dungeons and raids. Now, keep this in mind, right? Right now, you got people complaining about the game being too hard. Over the last few years, you had people complaining that the game is too easy. So what does this tell you, ladies and gentlemen? It's something we've been saying for the longest time when it comes to game development. You are not going to make everybody happy. Just make the game that you want to make and focus on doing the best that you possibly can with that game, because just like this is proving it, and just like so many other iterations are proving it, you are never going to make everybody happy. It is literally quite impossible to do so. But then it says Yoshi P comments have had some hoping that Dawntrail would raise the difficulty a little more, and it turns out their hopes were answered. Dawntrail has some pretty brutal dungeons along the MSQ, ending in boss fights that are definitely a step up in difficulty from the likes of Shadowbringers and Endwalker. There's a lot to keep an eye on. You need to react to multiple mechanics at once, and they hit like a truck. I agree with this. So again, I've been playing the game. I got 2 level 100s right now. I got a level 100 Monk and a level 100 White Mage, and I will absolutely tell you that the dungeons and the raids are much harder than they were in the previous few expansions. That's without a doubt. Even the final boss of the MSQ, that boss, we almost wiped like 5 or 6 times in a single setting. If I wasn't carrying the fucking group on my White Mage with the other healer, I had to do a level 3 limit break res on the group in order to save us halfway through. That's how hard it was. But you know what? It was fun as hell. It kept me on my toes. I wasn't able to just do Medica 2 and regen and keep the entire party alive until I have to do another Medica 2. Like, it's not that kind of thing. It's actually pretty fairly difficult, so I was having a lot of fun with it. But unfortunately, for games like Final Fantasy 14, it's going to have a very casual audience, and that audience is going to make themselves very vocal anytime they're even remotely challenged. For the most part, this step up in difficulty has been seen as a positive thing, but now that more casual players are making their way to the end of Dawntrail and hitting the more challenging dungeons, we're starting to see a fair few people claiming that Dawntrail may actually be too hard. One of the most infamous examples is a player called, I can't say that, Bear Scold, who explained on the Final Fantasy 14 forums that they're fed up with having to struggle through increasingly difficult dungeons when they just want to relax, and that they now dread seeing a dungeon pop-up in the MSQ. Bro, come on. Are you serious right now? Imagine saying in an MMORPG that, by the way, this is how MMORPGs have been since the dawn of time. MMORPGs have always had increasingly more and more difficult dungeons and gear checks, for example, too. But they've had increasing difficult dungeons over time, and they're trying to constantly challenge their players and keep them on their toes. Why would you think this will be any different? Having to struggle through increasingly difficult dungeons is a terrible fucking mindset to have. Like, you're so scared of seeing a dungeon pop up in the MSQ because it's getting harder and harder. Are you kidding me right now? Like, you pretend as if it's impossible. Most people are going to be able to clear this particular content very easily. Dungeons and normal raids are very easy to clear. Even if they're a little bit harder right now, eventually with better gear, as you get better gear, it's going to become even easier, the level 100 content. So why are you sitting there and bitching and complaining about it? I don't really know. But again, these are the kind of people that I feel aren't really MMORPG players. They probably heard about Final Fantasy 14 from some friend, and they probably thought that this was going to be a great game to socialize with people. If you want to just sit and relax and not do a fucking thing, you probably shouldn't be playing a game. Maybe you should read or something. You know, like playing a video game, especially an MMORPG with bosses and dungeons, isn't exactly the way you want to sit down and relax completely. You know, not in the way that he's describing anyway. You can find a lot of people agreeing with the comments, which have since made their way into the wider Final Fantasy XIV community. Of course, you won't be surprised to learn that drama has ensued, as many are fighting back against the claims that Dawntrail is too difficult to get through. For example, Twitter user Stardiver thinks the whole difficulty discourse is because people are now facing mechanics that expect them to learn from their inevitable mistakes. That's exactly what it is. It's people that don't want to dodge. It's people that want to be able to DPS and have tunnel vision. It's people that want to be able to do literally whatever they want, and the healer or the tank is supposed to save them. That's really what it is. I'm telling you right now, that is what it is. Theirs is one of several teams exploding in support as other people rush to defend Dawntrail's difficulty, as it appears the community is quite split on the matter. On one hand, those that hate Dawntrail's difficulty have to admit that it was far too easy to cruise through Shadowbringers and Endwalker, despite us coming up against evil, all-powerful beings. Well, especially with Endwalker, right? Endwalker is supposed to be the final bit of the main arc of Final Fantasy XIV. You would think that it would have some of the hardest content, or at least fairly difficult. But now, apparently, Dawntrail is harder than that content, and it makes you wonder, this wasn't exactly hard in the first place, right? This is actually pretty fucking easy, and people have been able to breeze through it easily. So that's all it is, man. It's players that don't want to get good. It's players that don't actually want to play the game, which is weird, by the way. I don't know why you want to do that. And it's players that, because they're not getting their way, they're going to go sit there and complain. Imagine all the time that you spent fighting, trying to nerf the game on the forums, you can actually spend that maybe on a DPS dummy or maybe doing something to practice or getting better and overall getting good. But no, you don't want to spend the time doing that. You just want to spend the time bitching and complaining. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.